Don Jr. and Eric Trump testify in the prosecution brought by Tish James. You know who she is. This was that excerpt from when she was saying that Trump was an illegitimate president with her facial spasms as she was running for office in New York as the Attorney General. But she's been mostly uninvolved in the trial other than sitting there and observing and posting X's on the X platform. But today, her office subpoenaed Trump's kids, man. Don Jr. and Eric Trump were brought in to testify. You can see there is Don Jr., and we know that his testimony started yesterday. So we're going to be picking up with him in this day where he is back on the stand, and we'll see some cross-examination and redirect potentially. We also are then going to hear from Eric Trump, and you can see Eric Trump came into the courtroom and he's seated there with his attorneys, and of course he's looking stern, he's looking ready to go, channeling dad. And look who we have over here. Well, of course we have Alina Abba, but we also have, look who's there, back sitting behind the bar again. Oh, it's Tish, stuck behind the bar again, sitting in the back of the courtroom. I don't know why that is, because she's got a pretty vocal Twitter account, but she's not so communicative when she's actually in the courtroom. She's sitting there like an observer, which is just wild. I wonder if she's live tweeting this for her blog. Anyways, that's what's happening inside the courtroom. And so now, without any further ado, let's jump right into the day's proceedings. And of course, we're going over to Adam Klasfeld. He's over at Klasfeld Reports. He's reporting over from The Messenger. Does great work. We're grateful for his reporting. And so make sure you give him a follow and a like and a retweet and a boost and all those things if you can. And so we'll do the same here as well. But this is what he is reporting. We're back in court. Trial back in session. Don Jr. enters the courtroom and he sits down at the defense table, attorney seated in tow. Judge Engoron is in the courtroom and he's jovial this morning. He's got a little bit of a joke to start us off. He says, "Good morning, everybody. There's no photography allowed in the courtroom." Okay, let the photographers in now. Yucking away. So they take a few photographs of Engoron, oh, Judge, you're doing such a historic job here prosecuting this thief, Engoron. They turn around to the defense tables, they take their photos. The judge says, "All right, get the heck out of here." Trial starts. Tish's attorney, she's sitting in the back there playing Tetris, and her actual person who does some work, her name's Colleen Faherty. Faherty comes out and says, "Good morning, Your Honor. The government bureaucrats on our table, we recall Don Jr. to the stand." Walks up there. He said, "Good morning, Don. I want to ask," and you start here, "did you discuss your testimony that we had with you yesterday with anyone?" He says, "No, I didn't." "Oh, that's good. Well, I want to show you an email with a subject line that's dated back from 2017. It says the following: urgent fact-checking inquiry from Forbes, dated March 3rd, 2017. And they ask some questions. They say, "Do you recognize this?" And Don Jr., he says, "Wow, there's an insane amount of stuff there." She's asking him some detailed questions about the magazines. Don Jr.'s response to the magazine's detailed questions: "I mean, what do you think about all this fact-checking?" He says, "Insane amount of stuff there." Okay, so that's what Don Jr. wrote, not what he said on the stand. Thank you, Adam, for the clarification. So, backing up. He says that in the email, Don Jr. wrote insane amount of stuff in there. And the email is about a Forbes article. It says urgent fact-checking inquiry from Forbes. Forbes sends an email. "We got some questions for you guys." Don Jr. must have forwarded it, 2017. Insane amount of stuff there. Like, they've got a lot in there. Like, what are they asking about? Hey, better look into this, all right? So that's what he wrote. Now, the Forbes press inquiry that evoked the response from Don Jr. was detailed. Okay, so this is what Forbes sent over. Forbes sent this one from Noah Kirsch to A. Garden at trumporg.com. Says, urgent fact check. "Hi, Alan. Hope all's well." To A. Garden, so Alan Garden. "Hope all's well. I'm Noah, magazine reporter at Forbes, assembling something on the world's billionaires. This is March 3rd, 2017. Okay, so Trump is now in office. You know, so Forbes is going hog wild. These people have like, you know, salivation coming out of their mouths. So let's get Trump and take him out. They're already setting him up with Ukraine, all the spying on his campaign crap. That's all being covered up by the FBI right now because they thought Hillary was going to win. Anyways, so Forbes is at it. They say here, you know, a bunch of questions about the Trump organization. How much has ownership changed? Blah, blah, blah. Puerto Rico. Are these documents legitimate? Felix Sater. What about this? Did you have an exclusive deal in Russia? Is this 2017 licensing agreement from the Dominican Republic still intact? Is this Trump penthouse still the same? What is the mechanical space? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this person's just like giving, you know, the organization a rectal exam, and they're just thrilled about it because they're working for Forbes. Noah is very excited about it. So he's like, "Hey, by the way, I apologize for the late turnaround. Because of our schedule, we'll need answers answers to whatever you can provide by noon on Monday. All right. So this friggin' jerk sends this email, 3 pages with like the most insane list ever. Can you give us questions about this? Everything might be legitimate. Who knows? And he says, can you give me answers by like noon on Monday? When did this email even come out? Friday. All right. So you got all weekend to figure it out. He sends the email Friday, 10 a.m. And he's like, wow, have a nice weekend. Good luck. Otherwise, we're publishing the article on noon on Monday. We're not accepting any changes after 3 p.m. Thanks. You guys are pieces of work, aren't they? So then they publish it. And then they say, well, Don, they didn't comment. They didn't respond. They didn't return comment when we asked them for comment. Whatever. So they say, Don Jr., they ask him a question. Tell me about what you thought about that. Can you clarify your statement? Ask him some questions. Don Jr., responds to these accounting questions. He says, look, again, Tish's attorney, Faherty, again, for the purposes of accounting, I relied upon the accountants. All right, not complicated. I say, well, all right, well, I want to show you a loan from Deutsche Bank, and it's called a Trust Company Americas, dated March 13, 2017. Is this your signature, Don Jr.? He says, yeah, looks like it. And isn't it true that you signed this as attorney in fact? And he says, looks, I says, yeah. And you did that for your father? He says, that looks right. And so the document here, if you read it in quote, it says the following, would you agree? Quote, the foregoing presents fairly in all material respects the financial condition of guarantor at the period presented. Did you see that, Don? Yeah. Did you remember reading that when you signed this document? He says, well, I don't recall this specific document, but yeah, signing certifications like this generally, yeah. I mean, I'm sure I've signed dozens of these certifications in my time as trustee. You say, huh, interesting. Now I want to show you another statement of financial condition. Now this one's back from June 30th, 2017. Now on this document, I want to just call your attention. It notes that the trustees were responsible for the report at the time. So, you might, right? It says the trustees were responsible. Now, John Jr. became a trustee that year, which is the first year of your presidency. So you signed it, meaning you're owning it, right? So then the New York Attorney General, Faherty, repeats a series of questions, probably very boring and dry as they are. And Don Jr.'s involvement in the statements, it goes back 2018, 2019, rinse and repeat, says Don Jr. Rinse and repeat, okay? Just do your stupid little cycle again. Circle it up. She says, okay, take it easy, Don. Now, Don is then shown another certification to Deutsche Bank that he signed back on October 31st. He's certifying these things. That's you? Yeah, that's you? You signed? Yeah, that's you? Rinse and repeat, right? I got documents I signed. Now, it also attached to that one a statement of financial condition. So Don is theoretically, she's making the point that he's certifying these things. And so you signed the certification intending that the bank would rely on it, right? He says, well, I would be fine with them relying on it. And she says, well, I'm going to ask you again. That's not what I asked. You signed the certification intending that the bank would rely on it. And he's dancing around the question, don't know what he's saying, but Judge Engerong just says, well, it's a yes or no. And he says, it's not as simple as a yes or no. Not at all. He said, I assume the banks would perform their own due diligence, like they receive a document. And Faherty continues to systematically sign documents, sign certification. Here, how about this one from this month? And how about this one from this year? And how about that one? On and on and on. Yeah. So Trump Jr., he continues to emphasize, he says, advice of lawyers, advice of counsel, advice of my accountants. I signed what they told me to sign. They said it's legit, sign the document. So Faherty's getting a little frustrated. She moves on from Don Jr. and she goes over to Deutsche Bank and others. She goes to another accounting firm called Whitley Penn. She shows Don Jr. his signature. Oh, is this on an agreement to sell, Don? He says, let me see. Well, yeah, what's that for? She says, for the Trump Ferry Point Golf Club in the Bronx. Did you sign this one? He says, yeah, I think I did. Looks like I signed it right there. Trump Ferry Point LLC. Now, this line of questioning sparked objections. Trump's defense is objecting. They say, Your Honor, that deal, the one that they're talking about right now in Bronx, it took place last year, okay? The lawsuit was filed already, and that happened after the filing of the lawsuit, so it's outside the scope. We shouldn't even be talking about it. It's too new. Judge Engeron, of course, says, well, whatever, I'll allow it. I don't care. Talk about whatever you want. And so Faherty argues that the fraudulent statements about the property were the backdrop of that sale. So Ferry Point comes back up again. And the judge finally looks over at Don, and he says, Don Jr., Mr. Trump, did you have anything to do with the statements of financial condition? No, I did not, Your Honor. Now, Faherty has mic trouble. One of her mics dies. Engeron from the bench is like, oh, cheap batteries. I hate those. What brand are they? Rayovac? Oh, the worst. And Faherty grabs another one. She's like, hold on, I've got a Duracell. Not sponsored. She MC says, here all night, folks. Oh, that's funny. What a nice personality. Before continuing her examination. What a funny joke. So Don Jr.'s testimony then wraps. She says, no further questions. Puts the mic back in. The mic's this thing on. Says, nope, all over. And then continues her examination. But it's over. And guess what? Trump's lawyers say, any questions for the defense? No, no further questions. That's it. No cross-examination. Alina and Christopher Keese are just sitting there like, nice job. 5-minute recess. We take a break and we're back. Guess who's up? Your Honor, Tishy bureaucrat bureaucrat prosecution table we now call Eric Trump. Eric Trump enters the courtroom, sits down at the defense table. The judge says, "Does everyone have their makeup on?" Now, of course, yesterday, Don Jr. made a joke about the makeup, but everybody forgot about that, obviously except the judge, for whatever reason. So then the photographers come back in and we're taking photos. So another Tish bureaucrat jumps up. His name's Andrew. Now, he calls the witness to the stand. "Your Honor, we call Eric Trump." Eric Trump walks up. I do. Eric Trump is sworn in. He denies. They say, "Okay, well, Mr. Trump, did you have any involvement in the statements of financial condition, sir?" Right out of the gate. Or probably, "You had involvement in the creation of these financial conditions, didn't you?" "That is incorrect," says Eric. "I never had anything to do with the statements of financial condition." Now, Klasfeld reports, he says that the questioning came up previously. New York Attorney General Andrew, the same guy who's up at the stand, confronted him with some data from a spreadsheet saying that he was involved in the creation of the financial condition statements. So here is some note. Okay, somebody entered this note. We know how in businesses you keep logs. I met with somebody. Here's what I did. Keep your minutes. 6/30/2012 per a telephone conversation with Eric Trump. So they show him an email. "Now, Eric, I want to show you this email from February 2012. He says, "All right, whatever." In the email, Alan Weisselberg, who was the former CFO of the Trump org, who has been convicted, says, "Before I respond, I want to make sure you and your dad are still going forward with this deal. Your dad did not sound very upbeat about the deal. He spoke about how little we would make and that he did not see himself going to North Carolina, etc." That's an email from Weisselberg to Eric Trump. So Eric Trump replied the next day. He says, "No, the deal was still on track to move ahead." He said, "We have bigger fish to fry, but we have it on the 1-yard line." Another email exchange. "Oh, thanks, Eric. Oh, here's another email for you. This one comes from February 15th. Now, Eric, you're sending this one to Philip Delk, another person." Now, Philip is doing due diligence for the North Carolina club. Eric sends an email to Delk. He says that his inspection of the company's financials was, quote, "bound by confidentiality." Eric tells Delk that the company, quote, "without question, had the financial wherewithal to purchase, renovate, and operate this asset. Says, I trust you understand and would appreciate you giving me your reassurance that this will not be distributed." Delk responded to the email. He says, "I will limit any communication to the fact that you do have the financial wherewithal to purchase, renovate, and operate the club." So it's Eric is involved in this conversation about this property, long story short. Earlier, they're saying, well, Eric flatly denied, quote, "having anything to do with his father's statements of financial condition." And so then the government person comes back out and says, "Well, what about all those emails? And how about this one, Eric, where you're also communicating with Jeff McConney's in his email from August of 2013. Jeff says to you, 'Hey, Eric, I'm working on your dad's annual financial statement.'" You remember that? I don't know what he says, but he says, "I've got another one. This one's from August 23rd. He's just walking through the sequence. Jeff McConney says to Eric Trump, "I'm working on the notes to Mr. Trump's annual financial statement, and I'd like to include any major construction work that was started, completed, contemplated at our golf courses during the last year, example to now." And so again, this is Adam Klasfeld reporting, and he starts a new thread. Make sure you're giving him a follow over there. And he gives us a breakdown saying that testimony continues to get spicy. They break, and Eric Trump is now trying to thread the needle. Andrew is trying to get this to split. Okay, so Eric is trying to say that I've got awareness of the statements, but I'm not involved in the creation of the statements. I sort of know that we need them. I sort of know that they're coming and going, and I am somebody who might maneuver them around and know of them, but the people who create them, right, those are a different group of people. So Andrew, the government person, is trying to cut through this distinction. He's saying, yeah, but you replied. You were a little bit more involved here. On August 23rd, Eric Trump replied to McConney. He said, all of Doral will be about $200 million. Do you want the Blue Monster specifically? Say Eric sends an email saying it's going to be all of Doral will be about $200 million. Do you want the Blue Monster specifically? He tells Amer, right, he's responding to this prosecutor. He says, so you were involved, weren't you? Because you said $200 million. So doesn't that show you were involved? And Eric says, no. I think where we're getting tripped up is on a distinction on what the info is for. He says, that's where you're getting tripped up. You're questioning why we're using the info, rather, what I would imagine is he's arguing rather than the creation of the info. Okay, what is the info for? They say, oh, okay, well, you want to play this game? Well, I've got another email from you, he says. How about this one from February 23rd? It says, we're were working on your dad's financial statement, says McConney, and, quote, attaching footnotes related to the 3 European clubs. Remember this? He says, I don't know, maybe. At the very end, he says, with all of the renovations that were done since the last statement in June of 2015, I wanted to ask you if there's anything you wanted to add to or expand in the footnotes. To expand in the footnotes, presumably, of the financial statement, right? So that, in other words, they're trying to say that Eric has some content creation that is going into the document. Is there anything you wanted to add to or expand, like you actually drafted it? Do you see where it says that in the email, Don Jr.? I'm sorry, Eric Trump? He says, yeah. He says, you understood that what he was attaching was a draft portion of your dad's financial statements. You understand it was a draft, don't you? Yes or no? Yes. Now, I want to show you this portion of a video deposition from earlier in the year. Was this testimony under oath? Eric said yes. Now, they play a little clip of it, but it's not this exact snippet from the same interview. And so Eric gives some testimony. Is your testimony under oath? He says yes. In the new testimony, Eric Trump could be heard denying involvement. He says, nope, I wasn't involved in the statement of financial condition, and I didn't send McConney any information to be used in it. They play some more video. Eric Trump in the video says, quote, I know nothing about the statement of financial condition. I don't know anything about the backup of the statement of financial condition. It's just not what I did. Do you remember saying that? He says, yeah. They play another clip. After this clip, do you have any reason to believe that McConney, this is in the depo still, referenced a conversation with you if it didn't happen? He said no, but he didn't have any understanding of what the information was for this financial condition, the statement of the financial condition. They say, thank you, Eric. Now, we want to move on to this property called Seven Springs. They take a break, but we skip it, and we're back. Mr. Eric Trump, I want to ask you about these 71 units at the Trump National Golf Club. Do you remember this email exchange from August of 2013? It is from, it looks like this person, David McCardle, who's a senior managing director. He says, hey, Eric, attached is the revised appraisal proposal totaling $12,500. I hope this works for you and we can move forward. Thank you for the opportunity. All right, so he's going to praise her, a valuation and advisory person. Eric Trump is shown in another email about his worth with McCardle on the project. They say, Eric, David McCardle, this is a follow-up to confirm that you're going to be providing support from your brokers for the potential pricing of the 71 residential units. We also discussed obtaining input from your construction contractors on the per square foot cost to build the project. At this time, we're moving forward with the discounted cash flow analysis and look forward to the pricing and the cost estimates from your team. Enjoy the weekend, Dave. More exchanges. Now, Eric is showed a notation on this spreadsheet. He says there was something attached to that email. It says here on one row in the spreadsheet, it says per a telephone conversation with Eric Trump, leave the value as is. Do you see that? Yeah. Do you remember that? No. Do you have any reason to doubt that that conversation happened? No. Well, now I want to talk about this other issue. You said that when we interviewed you that I really haven't been involved in appraisal work on the property. Is that true? He says, yeah, that's true. I really haven't been involved in appraisal work on the property. He said that was accurate. So you stand by your testimony in your deposition that you hadn't been involved in appraisal work at the Seven Springs property. He says, well, I was clearly involved in small points. He says, perfect, I know. So you'll concede then, since you were involved in a small bit, that your testimony was a lie. It was false, wasn't it? He said, you said, I don't focus on appraisals between a law firm and a real estate company called Cushman & Wakefield, but you did. You did focus on appraisals, didn't you, in these emails? He says no. He says, no, I don't focus on appraisals between a law firm and Cushman. These are emails from 10 years ago. I don't even know the person's name. Now, this person obviously testified earlier in the trial. So Tish's prosecutor comes back out and says, I want to show you some testimony from another Trump Organization executive. His name's Patrick Burney, from earlier in the trial. They were talking about a meeting, a change evaluation meeting between Eric Trump and Don Jr. They say, Eric, you consider Patrick Burney to be a solid guy, wouldn't you? He says, I like Patrick Burney very much. And you considered Patrick Burney to be a solid guy. Eric Trump looks at and gestures to the judge. He says, yeah. And the judge looks at him and carry on. So then the government says, Eric, I want to ask you about how you started to learn about Tish's investigation into your family. Now, Cliff Robert jumps up to object. Trump's defense. He says, Your Honor, I object. Tish's office is trying to sensationalize the trial by causing Eric Trump to invoke his Fifth Amendment. He says, well, that's exactly right. That's exactly the direction I was going. And he says it's very relevant. Robert notes, he says the subject matter is coming at the end of the day when it could dominate the news cycle. So they're just trying to cause a bunch of ruckus here. And Christopher Keys from Trump's defense jumps in and says, I don't know what else other than sensationalizing is the issue, or if this is just harassing the issue. Now, Angeron tears into Keys after he refers refers to the clerk. So Keese is just outraged. I don't know what else other than sensationalizing this issue is, or if it's just harassing. And by the judge, your clerk is constantly bringing in your ear, blah, blah, blah. And Engeron says, Mr. Keese, I have made many admonitions in this courtroom not to refer to my court clerk / girlfriend. Do not refer to my staff again. She's a civil servant and a total babe, so leave her alone. Sometimes I think there's a bit of misogyny in you, Christopher, in referring to my female principal law clerk, who I'm madly in love with. And Alina jumps up. Alina Abba goes, Your Honor, excuse me. I've known Mr. Christopher Keese for years. He's an upstanding man of honor and integrity. Any allegations of misogyny are totally unfounded, and I assure you that's not the issue. Subtext meaning the issue is your clerk is whispering in your ear because you don't know what the hell you're doing, and she's giving you orders from who knows who. She says, Your Honor, I will tell you this. It's not misogynistic. I'm a woman, and your clerk's conduct has been inappropriate in this courtroom. Engeron pounds the table, asserting his right to protect the clerk. I am in love. It's not a security issue. I protect mine. He says he has to make a record if he sees potential bias, and that's why I'm doing it. And Christopher Keese jumps up. He says, Your Honor, I'm not a misogynist. I've got a 17-year-old daughter. How dare you say that? And on that fiery note, trial is done for the day. More soon from Adam Klasfeld over at The Messenger. Okay. And so this actually turned into a big deal, right? There was a story about this, and let's see if Adam fills it in for us. And I think he did, but there was a lot going on there, right? So the judge was very unhappy about this, and we'll see what happens tomorrow when it comes back in. But this is over at The Messenger. This is Adam Klasfeld's report. So come on over here. Make sure you give his work a follow and a like. We're grateful for the reporting. But that, my friends, is what happened in court. The judge protecting his court clerk, protecting her honor, which is also ridiculous, okay? Now, the judge has threatened, I saw elsewhere, to expand the gag order to cover the attorneys, because the attorneys are apparently not allowed to comment on the improprieties by other people in the courts, right? If you really want to talk about free speech, we can talk about why it's inappropriate to condemn an illegitimate institution. That's the whole point of the First Amendment. It's to petition for a redress of grievances. It's to talk and to bring people to our side to say that what we're watching happening in court is unjust and illegitimate. That extends to the judge. It extends to the clerk and everybody else who's involved in the case. That's what happens when you weaponize the system, and free speech is the only safety valve to escape the tyranny. And so we'll keep talking about the judge's girlfriend or whatever as we're here. Now, Don Jr. is done. Eric Trump is very likely to be back tomorrow and on the next day. So we'll be here, my friends. I hope you join us as we continue to cover this. Thank you for liking this video. Thank you for subscribing and sharing this with a friend or family member so that they can see what's happening inside the courtrooms and unpack the truth of what they're trying to do to Trump.